Let's get started here. I'm going to talk for a few minutes about the chapter's status and just a few things. I did not have a subject for this one, so I'm just going to wing it for 5 minutes here. Wait for Andrew to get online. I'm going to send out for those that are here. Good morning, Andrew. Morning, Andrew. For those who have seen my massive emails coming out lately with the situation with the board, is that we have only one position has not been filled, and it's the most critical one, because as we talked on Tuesday, the National said that if we don't have a president, we have to actually give up our charter. We have enough directors. We have a treasurer and a secretary. Secretary's on staff right now, and that's Kyle. Treasurer's Jim Stukenberg, who could not make it today. And then we have directors on here. Yes, Nick Katz, Andrew Miller, Rich Ulrich, Tim Fisher, and Louis Vendetta. I'll get it right. So one thing is, when I send out the ballot, you can see it blank. I put some instructions in there what we're gonna have to do. If someone doesn't take that position, it's gonna fall back to me then. But I'm gonna be the past chairman of the group, okay? So I don't know what they're gonna do if someone doesn't step up, so I will definitely see if I can't rope somebody into it for the year at least to get me a break. You know, I'll be handling a lot of the affairs and helping that person learn the ropes of the chapter. So those online, you need to know that, so that when you see this email come out, I will put a read receipt on it and a yes, no vote. I'd like to see that you guys, somebody steps up, talk to the other members in the chapter that are on there, and I will appreciate anybody takes the position of president. Okay, only been doing it for 6 years, so.
So three gentlemen right here who look
Well, he's not
well suited.
yet.
Okay. Two.
Yeah. I know.
You will.
He's one of the highway guys that we finally got to come because the third Friday.
The problem is I chair two other committees on another organization, so.
Joe already told me that, and we got those are tough chairs, and we got AGC, we gotta do what they do. Anyway, I'd like to just share that with everybody on the in the room and everybody that's online. I'd appreciate it. Anyway, I appreciate you all being here. Again, today's topic is on wills and trust and estate planning and elderly law for construction estimators and their families. It's a very important part of life, people, that you have this in order as an individual for your family's sake. If none of you have it, you need to see somebody to get it set up. I don't want to bring up any past cases, but there's been people who have lost their lives in the construction industry. We're probably one of the second most or highest fatalities in our industry. Mainly the highway guys are really bad at that. They've done a lot better on that, but the construction trades in general, I think, are the second highest fatalities. So you go to work today, and it doesn't mean just because you're an office person that you're acceptable to missing that issue, but I know there was a guy that left work one day, stopped to pick up some wood that fell off a truck in front of him, was on the shoulder, and a car lost control of the flat tire and hit him. Okay, so that's the kind of stuff we're talking about, is that you can be an office worker or a construction worker in the trades. You need to be aware that your family needs to survive, so make sure you got your, I call it my death box, in order, and someone knows where your death box is at. Our guest speaker probably call it something else, but that's okay. I like to tell it the way it is. So I'd like to introduce Miss Heidi Dodge. She's the principal at Dodge and Wamball, Estate Planning and Elderly Law. She is an Illinois registered architect. Oh boy, here I go.
Attorney.
Not an architect, she's an attorney And yet she has relationships with people here in Missouri for those who are Missouri only. Just so you're aware of that. And I think she'll be glad to give it. I'm an Illinois person. I don't know how many else is. I think, Andrew Miller, I think you're an Illinois person, I thought. And Brad Fager is an Illinois person. So if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But I'd appreciate everybody, giving her a warm welcome and.
All right, I'm not sure where am I standing, because this is the
Well,
camera.
they can see you anywhere up there. If you want to stay in the back of the room, you can stay in there. I turn that way. It's my best profile.
Are you guys okay if I just kind of sideline it? So, yeah, okay.
That's
I'm
fine.
sorry to have my back to you. All right, I know, I don't know what to do. This is awkward. Okay, so my job is just to kind of share with all of you today, getting your affairs in order, right? Whether you're a Missouri resident or Illinois, and thank you, John, for having me. But really, it doesn't matter what state you live in, you need to get your affairs in order. And the basic kind of getting your affairs in order is really everybody needs a healthcare power of attorney. Once you turn 18 in my family, that's what you get for me for your 18th birthday. You get a healthcare power of attorney, you get a property power of attorney, and you get a last will and testament, right? You're sending your kids off to college. So this summer, we'll be doing a lot of kids' basics estate planning. We'll usually just powers of attorney, but sometimes we do a will, because once you send your kids to college and they're 18, as you all know, then you can't call the college, you can't access their medical records, you can't make those sorts of decisions if they aren't able to. So it's not only getting your affairs in order, although you all look young, so maybe you don't have college kids yet. I have one getting ready next year. It's just important that you have those 3 documents at a minimum, right? So a healthcare power of attorney is an advance directive. We're signing it in advance that in the event I'm not able to handle my affairs because I've been in a car accident, and I've been knocked silly and I don't know which ends up for quite a while, then I want to choose somebody who can make those decisions for me medically. Typically, these powers of attorney don't kick in until you lose capacity or you're temporarily unavailable or temporarily incapacitated because of an accident. And so oftentimes we choose our spouse, right? Usually, and then you want to have a backup to that because obviously we travel with our family and our spouses and those loved ones that we trust. So for healthcare, you want to kind of say, I'd like to have 2 people I can name. Typically, they cannot be in Illinois, and it's just not a good idea because if people don't agree, then we've got that whole back and forth. It's better to just have one person who can kind of call the shots on that. And for purposes of a healthcare power of attorney, Missouri, I will say this, is very, very detailed, right? They'll give you like 3 pages of, do you want to be resuscitated? And if so, do you want these sorts of drugs? And so they're much more specific. Illinois is kind of plain Jane. We got very basic. So it's like, when does your agent step in? Usually when you're incapacitated. What can they make decisions on? Pretty much just about, it's kind of like wide open. There's not all these specifics that Missouri has. So, and that's not a bad thing. It's just that they're drastically different in that respect. And then the last is that usually in Illinois is like, how do you want to be handled at end of life? So there's typically just 2 choices and they're terribly obvious, which is at the end of the day, keep me alive at all costs on machines, regardless if I'm in a coma, right? For however long that is. Or the first choice is, the quality of my life is more important than the length of my life. I want you to consider the relief of suffering. How long am I going to be, hanging out here in this state? And I'd rather be kept more comfortable and out of pain, and not be kept on machines and kept alive for an inordinate amount of time. So I always say most people in Illinois choose the first one, which is, the quality of my life is more important than the length of my life. And so, that's because that gives you most of the breath, and most of us don't want to be kept alive. Now, if you have religious beliefs or something else, you may choose the second one, which seems a little extreme to most of us, but Missouri is just way more detailed, which is kind of a good thing. And, if you've got very specific, I don't want amputation, I do, those sorts of things. I mean, it's just pages of very detailed medical procedures. So, it's a good thing, but you got to really also think through, well, I don't know, I've never thought about all of these different types. And also, a healthcare power of attorney helps us. It gets us through HIPAA. Everybody knows about HIPAA with your doctors and accessing medical records. So I always like to give the example when my dad had cancer, you know, he wasn't, my mom was obviously helping him navigate the medical world and they were going to all those appointments together. And so he didn't really feel up to like calling the doctors and making sure this doctor gets the x-rays for the next appointment and this doctor gets this, you know, the CAT scan or what have you. So the nice thing about a healthcare power of attorney also is it gives your agent the ability to access medical records and then share that information with whoever they need to. So in Illinois, we typically just say, you know, we want you to choose your first agent, and then it's nice to have a second. Some people will say to me, what if I don't have any, I've only got one? Well, one's better than none, right? So if that's the only person you've got, still do a power of attorney. Don't let it deter you from executing those documents. Also kind of touching, and you guys can interrupt me and ask questions. It's not a problem. A lot of people also ask me in Illinois, do not resuscitate, right? I'm sorry, I didn't beef up on this for Missouri, but also I can't give you any advice from Missouri because I'm not licensed there. However, in Illinois, the healthcare power of attorney is separate from a do not resuscitate. I mean, you guys are all young. You know, I haven't signed a do not resuscitate because obviously if I crap out, conk out for a moment or whatever with cardiac arrest, I want somebody to try to save me at this moment. Now, I don't want to be kept alive if after, you know, 3 months, there's still no brain activity or whatever. All right, then it's time to let me go. But a do not resuscitate is a separate document. It's also an advance directive, but it's separate. So we in Illinois have to sign those with our doctor. You can't sign them with the attorney. The doctor has to go through those documents with you. And then in Illinois, do not resuscitate is it's called a physician's order. And so they have to sign it and they just go through the detail with you. Like, do you understand? Do you want to be resuscitated or not? So yeah.
You say doctor. I see a physician's assistant.
Yeah, that same thing. I believe a physician's, yeah, it's a good question. Can your physician's assistant or the, you know, the other person you see, nurse practitioner? I know I'm pretty sure nurse practitioners can sign them as well, but definitely I think a physician's assistant can sign those do not resuscitates. But it's a conversation you have with your doctor, not with your attorney. So a lot of people think the healthcare power of attorney includes that. In Illinois, it does not, right? Yeah, so it's just an advance directive. And, you know, I always tell people, I mean, I don't know, you guys are young, so you may not have kids that you're naming yet, but, you know, I always tell people, pick the person who's going to honor your wishes. So for me, I do a lot of elder law. So I see a lot of clients in their 70s, 80s, 90s. And so they ask me, you know, well, little Susie is the nurse in the family, but she lives in California. That's okay. It's fine. Pick the right person, because in this day and age, and especially after COVID, we can do anything online. We can do Zoom. We can, you know, make those phone calls to the hospital. So just choose the person who's going to honor your wishes and who you think is the best fit for the job. Don't necessarily pick kid number 1 and 2 in that order if they're not the right ones for the job. And maybe little Johnny is the nurse and maybe little Susie is the accountant. So she's going to maybe handle the financial, right? She's got a better handle on the day-to-day paying the bills and things like that. So in healthcare, you just got to pick the right person and honor their wishes. They can also handle the disposition of your remains at the end of the day. So healthcare powers of attorney and property powers of attorney end at death, except for the healthcare power of attorney will allow that individual to handle the disposition of your remains. And that sounds kind of weird, but believe it or not, there are some knockdown dragouts. Where are we going to, especially if it's somebody who's young and, you know, you haven't shared your wishes on what you want. So it's important that with the healthcare power of attorney, you know, that person will honor whether you want to be cremated, whether you want to be buried, and where that is, right? So sometimes we don't know those answers because they're young or it came unexpectedly and we didn't have the conversation. So it's not a fun conversation to have, but it's worth just saying, like I say to my kiddo all the time, she's 17, just remember, I want to be cremated. It's okay. She's like, ooh, I'm like, no. It's my wishes, not yours, right? So you want, and sometimes I have kids who will say to their parents right in front of me, yeah, I'm not doing that. Okay, well then we're not choosing you. Well, I want to be the person. Well, you're not, because you're outright saying you absolutely fundamentally oppose cremation or burial or whatever it is. So you just want to kind of keep that in mind that you pick the right person.
Did you state that in the?
You can state it in your last will and testament as well. But again, the will doesn't kick in until death, right? So the healthcare, you want to make sure the person you choose for healthcare, because they really can't have that authority to handle it. But it is a good idea if you're very specific. You know, I have a lot of veterans. Are any of you veterans? Yeah. Okay. Thank you for your service. Anybody online a veteran? No. You know, who are buried over at Jefferson Barracks. And so, and then the spouse maybe, so we get pretty specific there just so the kids know, hey, this is where I want to be buried, that sort of thing. And speaking of burial, which is terribly fun, but kind of piggybacking on the healthcare power of attorney, it's also kind of good that, you know, you talk about what your intent might be for a funeral, but as you age and you're getting in your 70s, 80s, 90s, that's when you really want to make sure you've prepaid those funds. It's much easier on your kids. You know, if you, I mean, at least for sure, pre-plan them and make it very clear what your intent is, but prepaying them is a good thing as well. Doesn't hurt. I know it's not fun. I haven't done it yet. I figure I got time. If not, they at least know what I want. Any questions on the healthcare power of attorney? No? Okay. I mean, this is so exciting at 7:30 in the morning, right? Then we also talk about executing for financial purposes a property power of attorney. So property power of attorney is going to kind of handle everything else that medical can't. It's handling paying somebody's bills. It's stepping in and helping sell real estate. And I'm kind of giving you, you know, but it could be for my husband and I. I will use the example as a younger couple. A few years ago, my husband, we sold our car like outright as a private sale, which we've never done. And I had to keep kind of borrowing cars from my mom when they weren't home to drive because I didn't have a car until I bought a car. So he sends me over to the dealership here in St. Louis. He's like, all right, I think this is the one. You've trusted these. This is better, blah, blah, blah. Well, he and my daughter were both sick at home. So which is fine. I'm perfectly fine of buying my own vehicle, but he sends me to the dealership and I'm like, yep, this is the car. I'm going to buy it. And they said, you know, okay, we're just putting it in your name. I was like, I'm not stupid. I used to do family law. So I used to handle divorces and custody. So I said, no. You're going to put my husband on this debt too. I'm not stupid. And they kind of laughed. They're like, well, you qualified. I said, oh no, I fully understand. I could buy this vehicle without him. However, I'd like his name on it. So I had him send me the power of attorney for property. And he was like, why am I sending this to him? I'm like, just scan and email it to me. So I gave it to the dealership. Of course, I didn't tell them I was a lawyer because that seems to change the ball game too. And the price goes up. And so then they're reading the power of attorney. And I said, yeah, I just put his name on it. I'll sign as his power of attorney. I'll sign his name. And they said, oh, Dodd is it? And it was prepared by Harder, Larson and Dodd. Are you? I was like, oh, look, it might be that person. But the point was, I was able to, you know, legitimately get his name on I wanted his name on the title. I wanted his name on the debt, but also just because that's what I do for a living. He actually can't handle it. We can't buy cars together. So we're better off on our own. Because I just like having, if you can put your spouse on your car, it's just easier at the end of the day if something happens. But I also understand people, and guys tend to just go buy the cars for their wives or whatever, but people just kind of flip through cars pretty quickly. So it's fine if you don't have your spouse on them. I just am really adamant about putting my spouse on my car just because I see what I have to do when people pass away and they don't have names on cars, you know, so I'm just trying to save a step at the end of the day. But what happens to what?
If you die and your spouse isn't on their name on the
Yeah.
vehicle?
And it's okay. Usually in Illinois, you can do what's called a small estate affidavit to transfer it. It's not the end of the world. However, if you don't have a will and you have kids, then your spouse owns half the car and your kids own half the car with your spouse. That's what we don't want, right? It seems silly that you'd have to buy your two little kids out of the half the vehicle if you didn't do a will. So that's why we're talking about this stuff. We're talking about because apparently in your area of, you know, practice and employment, that the fatality rate's much higher than me as an attorney sitting behind my desk. So, you know, you just don't know. And it doesn't hurt to have a simple healthcare power of attorney, a simple, and if you're not married, choose your parents or choose your siblings, you know, somebody who would come to who would step up for you. But that's a great question. So so the property power of attorney, before I jump into wills, kind of covers everything else besides healthcare. It covers entering into contracts. It covers real estate. It covers, you know, paying your bills day to day. That's what most of us think of is if you're not competent, you're in the hospital, who's going to keep your mortgage up and who's going to make sure all your bills get paid, right? So that you don't get further behind on those things. So and you need to tell these people that you've chosen them as the agent, right? Don't just shove it in a drawer in the death box. Don't shove it in the death box and then not tell anybody. They at least need to know where it is and that you're their person, okay? Because sometimes people are shocked. Oh, I had no idea we had no idea my dad had documents, let alone that we were named in the documents. So property powers of attorney are just that. And typically those can go either way. They can be effective immediately upon signing, which is of course what I did for my husband and I, so that I could put his name on the car. And you do that if you trust the people. But also you can make it, I don't want anybody to step in and mess with my stuff until I'm not competent, or I've been, I'm temporarily incapacitated. So then you can also just make it spring into effect at a later date when you become incapacitated. And a lot of my, my younger couples, they might do that, but also my like 90-year-old fiercely independent widows who didn't have children and their niece and nephew are gonna help them out. They don't want it effective until they're not competent, because they are still running their show and paying their bills, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with getting a doctor's note that says, hey, you can't step in and be my power of attorney until the doctor says I'm not able to do it, right? It's not a big deal to get that from a doctor, because usually something's happened, and that's why we're doing it. So any questions on the property power of attorney? No? Okay, so the other thing, and I'm gonna touch on some more stuff, but at a minimum, you need the healthcare, the property, and the last will and testament. So the will is simply kind of telling who gets your stuff at the end of the day and who's gonna be your executor, right? And that's important. So you wanna name an executor who's gonna step in and be able to manage your affairs, gather all of your bank accounts, call the union. Hey, did they have insurance? Did they have life insurance? What about their pension? Do they have anything, any investments or anything with the union, that sort of thing. So you want somebody who is gonna be able to, like, probably it's your property power of attorney, because they're good with numbers and they're good with handling your affairs. But a last will and testament, when he said, well, what do you do if the spouse's name isn't on the car and you die? The last will and testament will handle that. So if you are married, typically everything goes to your spouse. If it doesn't, then maybe you should be in family law because you need a divorce. I did have that happen once. He was like, I'm not leaving my wife anything. She spends all the money. I'm leaving it all to my kids. I was like, and the kids were little and they were just fighting in front of me. And I was like, all right, well, this relationship is terminated because I can't represent either one of you because you're both bickering at each other and you're not on the same page. And then lastly, I was like, y'all need to go see. They were like, I know, we're headed that way. I was like, all right, well, I don't know why you bothered stopping here because this isn't going to help anything. But it's true. You usually leave everything to your spouse in general, and then typically to your kids. And then, but in the cases where you have your own accounts or you, sometimes spouses, you'll say, oh, this is my account, this is his account, we have joint accounts. But, I would recommend on those accounts that if you don't have them on your account for whatever reason, maybe you came into the separate accounts, that sort of thing, make sure that they're beneficiaries on those accounts at the end of the day. You kind of have to go out of your way for banks to put a spouse on as a beneficiary, or maybe they're joint. It's just that this is the account you roll with and he rolls with his own account, and that's fine too. But typically you want those items to be joint unless there's a legal reason or a personal reason, that you're keeping those things separate. But a will cover all those things. If you at the end of the day, if you don't have their name on the car, you don't have their name on a bank account, or you did your life insurance with the union before you got married or something like that, so you didn't have a beneficiary, well, then this is the time that the will step in and say, okay, at the end of the day, this is all going to flow to your spouse. So, and that's what you want. I had a doctor ironically, is heart stroke doctor at Barnes. This was about 15 years ago. He was, his exercise and pastime sport was soccer. So he was playing indoor soccer one night after work over here in St. Louis. The wife, who was a nurse, got the call and wouldn't tell her what was going on, just said, we need you to come. So he dropped dead right there in the middle of the soccer game. And he was 42, I think. And they did not have a last will and testament. And he was, I want to say he was Saudi Arabian, but he was, he was a US citizen now. But so what happened, so they just had a very traditional marriage, right? They met both like doctors and nurses, cross borders or whatever out of the country. And then they got married and came back to the States. But they had such a traditional marriage. And just because they looked at money differently, and it was just cultural, right? And she was staying home raising the two little boys, that when he dropped dead, her name wasn't on the house because he went out and got it and got the mortgage, he just took care of it. He was the one working at the time. Her name wasn't on the Mercedes. Her name wasn't on his Mercedes, she had her minivan. That was about it. She had no access to cash because everything locked down when he died. And she had a credit card, and she put the entire funeral on the credit card, maxed it out. So then she had no credit card to pay for day-to-day things. I literally was bringing baskets of food and they were eating crumbs and chips. And here's somebody who's sitting on, eventually is going to receive a bunch of money, but half of it. And he did have her like as a beneficiary on like maybe his retirement on insurance, but we had to split the Mercedes with the two kids, right? The value of the Mercedes. We had to split the value of the house, and that is never your intent, right? Is that your littles get half of it and your spouse is struggling to make ends meet. That's typically not the intent. So, but we did, and then we had to open guardianships for these little kids so they could hold their money that their dad, they inherited from their dad.
There an age limit on that?
No, there's no age limit. If you don't do a will and you have a wife and kids, 50% is gonna go to your spouse, and then the other 50% is gonna be split between your 3 or 4 kids or 2 kids or whatever. No, that's, in Illinois, that's the statutory law. That's pretty common in most states. I can't imagine Missouri being too far off the, so, oh God, take this with a grain of salt too, that it's Illinois. But yeah, no, that's Illinois rule. You know, if you don't have a will, the laws of Illinois will tell you who has the right to be executor, you know, priority of family members, and typically it's a spouse, but the kids can step into, and then who has the right to the stuff at the end of the day. So, so last will and testament at least gives us some basic direction. It tells us who's gonna be my executor and step in and make sure everything's handled and paid, and then everybody gets what's left at the end of the day. And then it also kind of tells us, you know, how we want things to go. If you have minor children, I typically do minors trust for anybody under the age of 25. My kid's a good kid, but if I gave her any money, and you know, for all of us at this age, we're all building our 401ks, we're building our IRAs. She's a great kid, but she has a Nike tennis shoe problem. So fed by my husband, by the way, not by me. So nonetheless, I think she would have and she'd buy Nike stock and she'd buy all their tennis shoes, and then we'd be out. She'd be living in a tennis shoe box because she would spend, you know, she'd be like, hey, it's not my money, it's my parents' money. So she is, I have her trust until 25. Because, you know, by then, and it's used for their benefit, but you can build a minor's trust into a last will and testament. You can keep your estate plan fairly simple, but still cover what you need to cover. So that's what's important to know. And if you've got older kids, you know, your kids are like 25, 30, and you've successfully launched them out of the house and out of the basement. They have not come back in, and they've got their own jobs, and they got their own life insurance, and they're building their stuff, which is great. That's what we want. We want to launch them, and it's like a one-way street. They do not come back, right? Because I do have a lot of, no offense, guys, I do have a lot of little Johnnies still living in the basement after 40 years. And if you are, no offense, it's just, sometimes they're still there because they didn't launch, but now they're taking care of the aging parents, which is then a benefit to everybody else. So it's kind of it's a double-edged sword. But yeah, then you can start, you know, renaming your beneficiary. So this is a conversation I have a long time. I haven't seen clients in 10, 15 years. Kids are out of college, kids have their own jobs. So I'll say to them, is it okay if they inherit out of the gate, you know, that they take these assets right away? So you want to look at your beneficiaries on your life insurance, your 401ks, your IRAs, and you want to update those. Maybe they used to just say my estate, so they'd flow through the will and you could protect the money until they turn 25 or 30. Now they're at that age. So let's name them directly, right? It's much easier if we name them directly. But a lot of my younger families, or with little kids, they'll name their wife and then their newborn, right? We don't want to do that. We don't want at 8, I mean, it would be held in a guardianship until the kid turned 18. We want to protect it till maybe 21, 25. I don't usually choose 21 because let's be honest, who needs more than 20 bucks in their pocket when they turn 21? I did not. I was a good kid. I went all the way through school, but I still didn't need more than 20 bucks when I partied on my 21st birthday. I mean, people are dragging you out of the bars. It's not, yeah. So you don't want that. And I have seen kids who inherit because dad died young and then grandma died and everything just flowed down to this one grandchild, and she was a train wreck. We drug it. Seen that?
I've seen that firsthand.
Yeah.
Not for me, but.
It's a mess, right?
Yeah, it's like throw responsibility out the window.
Mhm.
Just fair game.
It's awful. I mean, we got to the point where we drug tested this kid to get any money because she was down to nothing. She bought a condo like in downtown St. Louis. This was like 10 years ago. You know, dropped like 500 grand on a condo in downtown St. Louis, had all these newfound friends who suddenly, as soon as the money was getting low, you know, were gone. But she was doing drugs, and we had to drug test her for anything. We were like, get out, sell the condo. We're not helping you. You know, this is your own. But she was a good kid. She was going to SWIC and Ellen, like she was going to junior college. She was, you know, and then it's a slippery slope. I've never seen anything good happen. And I had another kid, the same thing. You know, he wanted like the Corvette. It's like, oh, no, we're going to give you a little Toyota. So then we finally bought, like, he seemed a little more responsible. They finally bought him kind of like a newer one, you know. I mean, it was like 3 weeks and he wrecked it. He totaled it. And we're like, yep. And then he wanted a new car. Nope, we're going back to the junkyard for you. I mean, really, you can't. And the people that are standing in and helping represent your kids, they have a duty to not, you know, screw it up too. But if you don't have that, I don't know how we managed to get some oversight over him, but we did. And so we just scared him into like, you can't do this. But that daughter, I mean, we finally got her to agree to park some of the money in a trust and then drug test her. But that was awful. I mean, dad died, grandma died. It was just money just poured at her. Yeah. So that's the things you want to avoid because you don't think it's going to be your kid, but good kids do stupid stuff with lots of money. Yeah. Unfortunately. Not many of them make the right decisions. It's just hard, especially in today's society. So you want to do a last will and testament at a minimum. And then some people will ask me about a trust. Should I do a trust? So a last will and testament may or may not protect you from probate, which is going to court and administering your estate at the end of the day. If my husband and I died tomorrow, our daughter's 17, so she would be under guardianship. So we'd have to go to court regardless, but I have a trust. And the only reason I have a trust is because I write them, right? So it's easy for me to do. But a revocable living trust is taking your estate planning to the next level. So a trust will help you avoid probate. It keeps it private out of the court system unless it's contested. But it keeps it private. It helps you avoid probate. And it makes it a little easier to name, so for example, I'm a perfect example. My husband and I both have our 401, our IRAs, our 401ks, your retirement that you're building. And then we both have some life insurance, right? And then obviously we have joint accounts because, it's me. I want things joint on everything. So, but that's where the bulk of our assets are. We still have a mortgage. So we have some equity in the house, but the bulk is our retirement. And that we do not want her to have right out of the gate. And so we name each other as beneficiaries in case something happens to each other. But if something happens to us simultaneously, the trust is the beneficiary. So a trust does help avoid probate. It also helps us have a vehicle to name as a beneficiary. And then that way the trust will control those distributions until age 30. And she can, whoever her trust, it's just that we have a trustee over her money that will make sure she doesn't go buy a Corvette, or she drives a Jeep. So of course she wants all the Jeep stuff to the Jeep Wrangler. She's always tricking out her car, but that's because she's paying for it. And so that's the whole point of that, is that the trust will help you name that beneficiary as a minor. So our trust is the beneficiary in everything after each of me and my husband. Now, as she gets through college and launches, let's hope. I'm still in trying to launch mode. Then, she's got her own job and stuff and she's 30, then we'll probably change our beneficiaries to her. Right. So, but she's an only child. So that worries me a little bit too. Just like that she doesn't get taken advantage of. She's a smart kid, but again, good kids do stupid stuff if they get with the wrong person. So, and you've seen it firsthand. So a revocable living trust kind of takes it to the next level and it helps us avoid probate. And typically the two things in Illinois that trigger probate, and somewhat similar in Missouri, I do know that because I'm opening probate in Missouri all the time with my Missouri attorney friends because my clients own property. Everybody in Illinois owns a Lake of the Ozarks art. They've got a house in the Lake of the Ozarks or a lot, a camping ground, something like that. So the nice thing about a trust is it helps us avoid probate in Illinois and it also helps us avoid probate in Missouri. So oftentimes what happens is, we'll deed in your Illinois house into the trust because the two things that trigger probate, which is going to court and running your estate through the court system, is real estate that's just in your name alone. So it's fine when the first spouse dies, but if my husband and I die together, then it was just in our names alone. So real estate that's just in your name alone, or in Illinois, it's assets of $100,000 or more that trigger probate. Missouri is different. I don't know what the limit is, but it's less. It's a little bit different. And so, but usually in each state, typically real estate that's just in your name will always trigger probate. Okay. Missouri has a different way of cleaning it up. So, but I have right now somebody who did a trust and they didn't tell us that they bought stuff in Missouri. So the Lake of the Ozarks house and that they bought never went into the trust. So when they died, we had a trust with most of the stuff in it. And then we still had to probate in Missouri. So that's because it's out of state. So if you have multiple properties in Illinois or Missouri, or you've got out of state, a lot of my clients own a condo in Florida. It's either Florida or Missouri, and so that's where most of their properties are. And that's the ones who then we always recommend a trust. And a trust grows with you. You can change the trust. It's revocable. You're in control. We typically do joint trusts, or each husband and wife will each have their own trusts and they'll kind of share properties. It means you still have the right to live in your house. It just means we're sharing them in between the two trusts. But a trust just takes it to the next level. So if you have multiple properties, I almost always turn to a trust, especially out of state. Multiple properties. Any questions on trusts? No? Okay. What's I gonna say about the trusts? Multiple properties. Oh, Missouri is good about this. Illinois has just gotten on board. If you have a simple estate, right? Maybe you just got your first house, you're single, or not, or married. But we can also do a beneficiary deed on real estate. So Missouri's had this for quite a while. Illinois just got on board in the last 8 to 10 years. So it's called a transfer on death instrument. You know, like when you go to put your insurance beneficiary, right? You list your spouse and your kids or the trust. That's a transfer on death. You're payable upon death. You're designating who the beneficiary is. Illinois now allows that for your residence or other property. Missouri's been doing it for a while. So that's another alternative to having to do a trust. If you maybe just have one piece of property or two, and they're not a big deal, and you just have 2 kids and they get along, then you can put those, you know, those kids' names on that. And the deed will say, we continue to own it, Heidi and Jeff, we continue to own it, but at our death, both of us, if we still own this property, then it passes to our daughter. And then we can avoid probate that way too. So that's another alternative to potentially a little more pricey, expensive trust. You know, trust work's a little more expensive. The concept behind the revocable living trust is you're pre-planning. You're getting ahead of having to avoid probate and pay those court costs. Well, you're not paying them, the estate's paying them at the end of the day. So it's kind of a trade-off, you know. There's a lot of other reasons to do a revocable living trust. Do you have a child with a disability? Do you have a grandchild with a disability? So then we can also build in special needs trusts. That's probably my favorite area of the practice. I have a pretty active practice when it comes to special needs trust. So it's amazing how many families, when you ask, they're like, oh no, my kids are fine. Oh God, my grandkids got autism and I want to leave them something. All right, well then we need to make sure that we build in a special needs trust for the grandchild at the end of the day. It doesn't seem right now because kids are still alive and everybody's fine, but you never know if the child, you know, your child will predecease you, or sometimes people want to just leave to that disabled child. So special needs trust also is another part of estate planning, but it's also another reason to do a revocable living trust. So, you know, there's a disabled adult or child in your family that you want to leave to, and also, you know, another nice reason to do a trust is if your kids are spendthrift, they are going to blow through the money. I mean, I give my kid a hard time. She's not that bad of a spendthrift, but you know, somebody who, yeah, I want to have little Johnny, but there's no way he's never kept $1 in his pocket. He'll give it to whoever, he'll spend it, or they have a gambling problem, or they have an alcohol problem. So as a parent, you want to make sure that they're cared for. You just don't want to give them, if they have a drug problem, you sure as hell don't want to put that money in give it to them outright, right? Because I mean, we've seen that happen where they get the money and they overdose and then it's game over. So that's certainly nobody's intent. I mean, we've had that happen. So that's another good reason to do a trust, is to kind of just have somebody, that way you flow the money through the trust and you appoint a trustee at the end of the day who can handle those things. Any questions on trusts? You guys are a quiet group. Okay, I know it's like 7:30 in the morning. I'm gonna just throw in a little bit of the elder law part, partly because not for necessarily you all, but for your parents. So I feel like you guys are kind of like me. I'm assuming everybody's, well, these guys aren't in the 50s, or this one isn't. This one isn't. But you know, where you're kind of just hitting that part where you're the sandwich generation, where you've still got kiddos at home, you're caring for, you're active with, you're keeping them afloat, taking them to the doctor, and now you have mom and dad who have need doctor's appointments, need your help, and you're kind of pulled. I'm telling you, every single time my kid goes down for the count where she needs, like, it's important, we need some medical attention, my mother is like, I broke it down, you know, whatever. I mean, it seems like if not one, then the other. It is just my destiny to be pulled constantly into both directions at the same time with the two of them. And thankfully I have a spouse, but nonetheless, it just seems like when one goes down, the other one craps out of me too. And I'm like, are you kidding me? So, and by the way, then I'm probably in court at the same time. All of this is blowing up while I'm in a position to not be able to walk out the door for anybody. But, yeah, so you want to think about your elderly parents. So I'm just giving this kind of as a quick overview because I think this is important. And Missouri is definitely different on this, but these are just general concepts you guys need to be thinking about. Not only should you have your own affairs in order, but your parents should have those exact same documents. Because if they fall, break a hip, or have a stroke and they're out, you've got nothing. If you do not have documents, if your parents do not have documents in place, then you're turning to guardianship. You're going to the court, asking the court for, you're hiring a lawyer, you're asking them to go to court and get a guardianship over your parents. And I do that a lot for my 70 or 80-year-olds when they, have an event that they have a heart attack or they have a stroke and they're not recovering well and they're gonna have to go into the nursing home. And the kids are calling me like, God, nope, we didn't do documents for that. They can't find any documents in place. So the alternative to not getting your affairs in order is then relying on attorneys in the court system to help you through it during an emergency. And I always say that's the last thing you wanna be doing is going to court for guardianship while you're in the middle of a crisis, a medical crisis with that person. So, but that is the alternative if you don't have those things in place and you need them, even for a child, is to get guardianship of the person, which is like the medical decisions, and guardianship of the estate, which is the paying the bills. So that's in place of a healthcare and a property power of attorney. We'd rather not be having to do that. Yeah. So that's the alternative. So an elder law my elder law hat is telling you, have this conversation with your parents right now and enforce the conversation of just like, hey, do you guys have these documents? Hey, I just sat and listened in on a little, conference call on this. Do you guys have these documents in place? What do you want? Do you want, and especially if there's any strife in the family and it's I'm looking at mostly guys, I got a couple gals on here, but or there's farm ground in place and the son's getting the farm, the daughters are getting the cash. That's instant fight in farm families, just because, right? There's a lot of, maybe the kids don't want to come back and farm at all and whatever. So you want to make sure your parents have their affairs in order. Even if it's a simple will and powers of attorney, that's better than nothing. It tells us who's in charge, who's going to step up, and that we do have those documents in place. So that, and then the next step to that is like, what happens? There's an event, they have a stroke, they're not recovering well in the hospital. They send them to rehab, which is the normal route. You go to rehab and then they're not improving in rehab. So then the nursing home says to you, because they're not going to keep them very long on Medicare. The nursing home says, oh, by the way, you're running out of Medicare days as of tomorrow. Your parents are going to have to private pay in this nursing home. And you're like, what? Average cost of the nursing home in Illinois side is running $7,000, and that's not for the top-notch nursing home. That's $7,000 a month. So you're looking at their income. How are they going to pay for this? And that's my elder law hat, right? And the attorneys I'll give you in Missouri do estate planning and elder law too. I've got a couple names I can share with you guys, or I can just forward them to John, and then you can have them in an email if you want. Yeah. So, but that's the other part of what you want to think about. Elder law, maybe not for you all because you're young, but elder law for your parents and making sure that they have their affairs in order, and just use this conversation today as an excuse to have that conversation with them.
$7,000 for
Nursing home for,
something like highway property.
yeah, and that's for just an average.
Just one of them.
That's
insane.
real.
The nice ones over here are running 10 to 15,000 a month.
Wow,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
nuts.
And then parents want to start gifting houses to you and transferring things so they don't have to pay for so they can get on Medicaid, which is the state of Missouri or the state of Illinois paying for their care. Well, those have a 5-year look back of transfers. People back in the day, if you remember grandparents doing it with your parents, you could transfer assets and maybe potentially become eligible right away. Well, they went with a 3-year look back on looking to see if it's always the house or the cars. Now it's a 5-year look back on the transfer of assets. So, and I also don't recommend that your parents transfer the house to little Johnny, little Susie, and little Matthew. Like that's not, there's other planning that can be done. But that's why you talk to elder law attorneys and estate planning attorneys and say, how do I make sure my parents' affairs are in order, right? Now, if your parents are sitting on a couple million, they probably have plenty of money to pay for their care. It also depends how much they have coming in income, right? You got Social Security. Did they have a good pension? That generation is still sitting on good pensions. Our generation, we're either taking that lump sum of the pension, are you going to take the monthly buyout? And maybe with the union, you get both. I don't know. But a lot of people my age aren't, I mean, my husband's a dying breed at Ameren. They have a pension still. But that, you just don't know. I mean, I think the unions still have a good pension.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, that's why you're here too, partly, right? Because they have built that pillar for years and it's there. So that's a good thing. You're getting the monthly pension, which is the drip, and then you've probably got some investments with them too over here. So that's the beauty of it all. But a lot of people with companies aren't getting, they might be getting the 401k, but they're never going to have a monthly pension in addition. you know, so the unions, I think that's probably the only other place I'd say that's the most solid, where you know you can still get those pensions. Other companies are just doing away with them. You're just taking the lump sum and then you're figuring it out at the end of the day. So, so just things to consider. I mean, it sounds weird, but the elder law part's important for your parents.
So let's talk about this look back you're talking about.
Yeah,
So that's Medicare, like if.
not Medicare, Medicaid.
Medicaid.
It means
So-
we're out of money.
So
We're not-
say your parents run out of money.
Mhm.
The government pays for them, but they look back.
Yeah, so let's just say mom and dad live off social security, right? Maybe he gets 2,000 a month, mom gets 1,000 a month, right? That's not uncommon. And they don't have any pensions. They worked hard all their life, they saved, but they're kind of, you know, the house is paid off. So they have a house and maybe they've got 250,000 in the bank. That's not a ton. You want to talk to your parents about prepaying their funeral because that's an allowable thing to do before you go on to Medicaid. If not, they run out of money and you ask the state to pay for their care. There's no money then left to pay for a funeral at the end of the day. So you want to make sure those things are handled. But Medicare and Social Security go hand in hand, right? That's what you hear. Social Security, then you go on Medicare health insurance. Those are because you worked and you paid into the system, right? That's something if it's still around for us, it will be there. Medicaid is the payer of last resort. I'm just talking about nursing homes right now. And it means you've pretty much run out of money. In Illinois, you have to spend down to $17,500. That's all you get to keep. It used to be $2,000. In August, for the first time in the whole time I've ever practiced 15, 16 years in this area, they bumped it up to $17,500. Missouri's a little different. So I'm just giving you Illinois numbers. They're drastically different on this. In fact, our Illinois clients are better off if they go to Missouri Medicaid. Sometimes they only come to Illinois because a certain nursing home will handle this ventilator, but if not, we're like, you may be better off, you know, depending on what kind of care you need. Because Medicaid in Missouri is a little different. But the general concept is, if you're applying for Medicaid for a parent or a loved one because they've run out of money, they're gonna ask you on the application, have you gifted or transferred any assets in the last 60 months or 5 years? And that includes transferring a car to the grandkid, because parents aren't driving anymore. That includes transferring the house to the kids. And the other mistake kids make is they'll put their name on the house or they'll just deed it outright to the kids thinking they're protecting it. But the kids inherit that ground or that real estate at the value their parents paid for it, not the date of death value that they would get the step up in basis. So there's some tax considerations there. I mean, I'm kind of getting into the weeds now, but in general, it's a 5-year look back. They're asking for, in Illinois, they're looking at transfers of writing checks to kids, anything over $500 to $1,000. They're tracking every one of those. And they're asking you for 5 years of bank statements, 5 years of checks, and they're gonna dig in and they're gonna deny you or say, we see that mom wrote everybody a check for 10 grand, you know, in year 3. What was that for? Oh, she was just gifting to us. Yeah, well then you either have to return that gift or they're gonna penalize her that $30,000 for the 3 checks mom wrote.
Because it hasn't been taxed.
No, because it should have been saved and spent on their nursing home care and not given to the children, even though the parents weren't sick 3 years prior. So when my elderly clients come in and they're in their 70s, 80s, definitely their 90s, and they're like, hey, you can still do birthday gifts and stuff like that. Don't get me wrong. But they're like, so can I, because the accountant will tell you, you can gift right now, the amount is 18,000 per person per year. Used to be 10, then it was 15. It goes up every year. So it's $18,000 per person per year. I can give each of you $18,000 and not have to raise my hand to the IRS and file a gift tax return. We all have right now the ability to gift up to a little over 13 million in our lifetime and tax-free. Most of us aren't gonna have that problem. If I had that problem, I wouldn't be here. I'd be on the beach somewhere. So, but you know, so the accountants will tell you, mom and dad, yeah, of course you can gift to your kids, you know, without a penalty for tax purposes. But for Medicaid purposes, you absolutely have a penalty. And so, you know, you gotta make sure that, but I've got a client who has, you know, she met with me last week and she's got 2 million in the bank. She's late 70s and just is pretty, you know, middle of the Alzheimer's dementia, still functioning, talking to me, but then every now and then falls off. You're like, whoa, what just happened? You know? So, still, and knows she's getting ready to go into assisted living and she has the money and she's like, can I gift to my kids? I said, absolutely not. because we don't know how long this is gonna last. You could live for 7, 10, we could drain your resources. And then the kids were all sitting there. I was like, do you wanna hold that money and promise you're gonna give it back to her or be penalized? Or which one of you is gonna keep mom, because she's not eligible for the nursing home to be paid for by the state until that money is, because they're gonna penalize you for those transfers.
Is the,
And-
is the look back period shorter for veterans?
No. Oh, for VA benefits?
Yeah.
Yes, okay, so I didn't think we'd get into this, and this is good. So there's Medicaid, so let me just talk about really quick, the continuum of how you pay for care, right? The first way you pay for Medicaid or for nursing home care is out of your pocket. What is mom and dad's monthly income coming in? Then you look at their resources. What's all the IRAs? It's everything, IRAs, 401ks, life insurance, cash value, it's everything. CDs, money markets, whatever. And if your parents are divorced and they remarried and have a prenup, the prenup means nothing. The state doesn't care about the prenup. They're responsible for their spouse's care, period, which sucks. So my mom just got remarried 5 years ago and she's 82 and he's 86. And I was like, please don't do this. Please live in sin if you think it's sin, but none of the rest of us do. Please don't do this. You're responsible for each other's care. But my mom had the whatever, so they had to get married. So the prenup, I told them, the prenup's not protecting either one of you, right? You're responsible. And so if you think you're protecting for your kids and he's protecting for his kids, you're not. So know that. But the continuum care is private, private pay through your monthly income, your assets. And then we look to, do we have long-term care insurance, which is nursing home insurance? Most people don't have it. Some do. The older generation has some good policies left for you and I to buy right now. And I'm talking to my advisor, just met with him Friday. It's probably going to cost me, I don't know, about $150,000 to buy a policy. If I want to chunk it into 10 years and be done. Yeah. But now those policies are, if you don't use them, so the old long-term care insurance policies was if you didn't use them, you lost them. So people were paying all this money and never get anything back. Now the policies are, if I don't ever use that money for my long-term care, at least it's like a life insurance. So my family will get something at the end of the day. So they're more hybrid policies, but that's the third way we pay with long-term care insurance. Then do we have a veteran or a veteran spouse? Because there are VA benefits out there that will assist in paying. It usually gets triggered in assisted living because for the Veterans Affairs to pay for any care that you need, you have to be needing care. You have to be needing assistance with activities of daily living, which means mom fell and broke her hip. She can't get dressed anymore. She can't get in and out of a chair without assistance. She can't, or you can't feed, they can't feed themselves. Assistance does not mean medication reminders and dropping off meals, right? Because that doesn't mean that. So for the VA benefit, and for the VA benefit, there's a 3-year look back on the transfer of assets. There used to be no look back. Back in the day, back in the heyday, we were killing it, right? We were protecting assets and irrevocable trusts, which we haven't talked about. And then we were getting people on the benefit. Now the VA, there's a 3-year look back. And so it's a little different than Medicaid. Yeah, but they're asking the same thing because they're like, hey, we got to get on board with this. This is killing us. And they're asking, have you transferred or gifted any assets in the last 36 months? And the VA right now, I'm ballparking this. I think you can have about $150,000 joint with a couple. But so you've still got to spend everything down to the 150. You could keep your house, a car, the 150,000. And then they're looking to see, are you paying out care? Are you at an assisted living where you're paying $5,000 a month, but mom and dad are only bringing in 3, so they're short $2,000 a month? That's a perfect scenario where it would really help a veteran. They might turn on, so the VA will pay a monthly income out to you as long as you're getting that care. And you got to go through all the medical side of it. And the doctors have to say, yes, this is the care I'm getting. Does that answer your question, Kyle? Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Uh-huh. Any other questions on VA or Medicaid? No. Okay. Any other questions you just want to pick my brain on? Was this helpful just for your own? I'm glad we talked about the elder law side of it because, it's
Well,
important.
you kept talking about how young you are, but the truth of the matter is, we're going through this right now. My mom is losing her eyesight. My dad's got dementia. I lost my father-in-law last year.
So you're in the thick of it.
My mother-in-law's in deep depression. She fell Sunday. My wife goes over, like I said, it's multiple things from every direction.
Right. Right. So you're right in the thick of the city. Yeah, you're in the thick of it. So one more thing I want to say about that when you talked about your wife's going over. If you are a child and you're kind of doing the caregiving, right? I mean, you guys are all working and you're juggling it, but sometimes we got kids who just finally have to just quit their job. You know, all the other siblings are like, hey, if you'll do it, like, whatever. So if for some reason, a couple of things to not make like tips and tricks that so you don't screw up later. Don't have your parents gift out the tech. Yeah, we can gift that, but we can't for Medicaid, right? That's the first one, that 18,000 per person per year. Another one is if you are picking up stuff for your parents because they are depressed or they can't get out of the house or whatever's going on, and you're buying stuff, your wife's running the errands, she's buying all their groceries, she's buying all the stuff at Walmart, use their credit card, right? Use their credit card or have them pay for it. If for some reason you're like, I went to Lowe's, I bought a bunch of stuff for dad, whatever we needed, or I maybe, you go to the Walmart and you're buying diapers or whatever it is. It's hard to imagine, but you're right on that cusp. Then if you have to pay for it, you have your parents reimburse you dollar for dollar, and it will say on there, $124.03 Walmart reimbursement, period. Like, be very clear on your reimbursements and your documentation, because if we go through a 5-year look back or a 3-year look back, you've got excellent documentation to say, no, my mom wasn't writing me checks for $125 every week. That was me picking up diapers. Well, do you have the receipts? No. So save your receipts and document if you reimburse them dollar for dollar. And if it's like, write 5 checks. This was for the Walmart run. This was the Sam's run. This was the Target, whatever, just be very clear on your documentation and save your receipts. Just stick them in the mom and dad folder, whatever. If you have to organize them later, so be it, but at least you have them. And have your parents, another tip, have your loved ones that are aging and that could be on the brink of needing some help, have them save their bank statements for the last 5 years, right? We're all so electronic, we don't even print that stuff. So kids will start converting the bank statements online and doing all their banking online for their parents. Well, then we don't have any written statements because they can require the last, right, because you're just making it happen. So make sure you're either printing those statements or your parents are getting written statements and you're saving those, because they can ask for it. The state of Missouri or Illinois can ask for those bank statements for 5 years back. And then it's a bitch to get them from the bank. The bank may not always give them to you, and then they're charging you out the wazoo for the copies.
Really?
Yes. Yep. Oh yeah, we've seen bills of $300, $400, $500 and obviously we don't have money because we're asking for Medicaid, so we don't have any money to pay for the printing of all those papers. So that's another tip and trick. Reimburse yourself or have them pay directly, right? And if you are a power of attorney, here's another tip. You sign. So for example, if I'm signing for my husband, I sign Jeff Dodd by Heidi Dodd POA. I don't just sign my name, Heidi Dodd, because then it's me signing for myself. I'm signing Jeff Dodd by Heidi Dodd POA. You always want to sign, that's the way you sign as a power of attorney when you're stepping in for somebody. You sign their name, because that's the power of attorney is giving you authority to sign their name, but then you designate, I'm the power of attorney for property or healthcare, okay? Don't ever sign nursing home contracts, assisted living contracts as the responsible paying party. There's some nursing homes in Illinois that like to trick my clients and they'll put an X here, you just sign here. Then that client, the daughter, is personally liable for that bill. And I've had it happen more than once.
When you do that, you sign
Their name by Heidi Dodd POA. Or if they can sign those contracts, maybe they just need assistance with other things, have them sign themselves. Have them pay, have them sign themselves, right? And if it's easier to just take mom and dad's credit card and buy their stuff on there, that's fine too. But they should be paying for them, so they should be signing for themselves until they can't. And if you do sign, you sign their name by power of attorney Heidi Dodd. Okay.
Another thing I'll point out though, these copies of receipts of stuff that's paid over time. I've always made copies of it because the IRS checking on me. What are you talking about here? You got a copy of it? Yeah, hold up my copy pieces. Yeah, no, I copied it when it was fresh. You
Yeah.
can see it. Shows up the time.
That's a good tip. Your receipts fade over time. So, you maybe once a year try to make copies. Yeah.
What is this for? It doesn't say nothing. Well,
There's some water in here.
deduction, no, they
Yeah.
do that stuff, so.
I didn't drink water. Yeah. So that's a great tip. Okay.
One other question, you started to say about if your spouse or somebody stops and is caring for somebody.
Oh, yeah, care contract, thank you.
Don't they get reimbursed? Can't you get reimbursement for care?
Yeah.
Sorry, the water.
There's water in the cat.
It's fine. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so that was the other thing. Thank you for bringing me back to that. Care contracts, right? So you're the one providing the care. If you're going to do a care contract, you need to have something formally written up. You know, I do them all the time for kids, whatever, taking care of niece and nephew, whatever. Thank you so much. Okay, so yes, if you wanna do a care contract, this is important for our VA guy, Kyle. If you wanna do a care you wanna put it in writing. If I'm the one giving care to my mom consistently, and she's gonna pay me for that, you gotta pay monthly. You cannot go back 3 years for the last 3 years that you've been giving care. It has to be commensurate with the service provided. It's like your own little caregiver service agency, okay? If we paid a caregiver, we would be billed monthly. Probably weekly, but we would be billed monthly to minimum, you know, for the care they're giving our parents. So if you're the one giving the care, you need an official care contract in writing, and your parents need to write that check out of their checking account to you, and technically that's income to you. But it might be worth it, right? It just might be worth it, but it is income to you. So if it's income, it's through the care contract. If it's reimbursement of expenses, we want to put that on there, reimbursement of expenses. You know?
I thought the government paid to care for you. Is that not true?
Not necessarily. I mean, disabled children, parents who have a disabled adult child can get paid through the state, through some Medicaid stuff if they qualify as to be their formal caregiver. But then again, it's a formal, but for your aging parents, yeah, no, it's just your job.
Like that's just something.
But it-
Yeah, because we got, you can get paid the same day.
Well, I mean, for VA and Medicaid, you know, if you're gonna be giving care until you can't care for them anymore, you want that in a formal written agreement, and you want it to be paid month to month, and you can't go back and ask for money from last year or 6 months ago. You want it to just keep up with in Illinois, I don't know what it is in Missouri. I feel like I'm no help to you guys. In Illinois, we usually say the average caregiver is running about $25 an hour. That's what we pay privately to get somebody in. But that's also why you want an elder law attorney to help you back into the correct numbers and make sure everything's on the up and up. You're like an independent contractor for whoever you're providing care for, right? So, and maybe it's just a few hours a month of the groceries and making meals and stuff. And if you want to bill for that, fine. If not, make sure that they're buying if you're buying all the groceries, that they're reimbursing you for that, or that you're taking them to the grocery store and they're paying for it. Yeah. Good questions. Anything else from you guys? No? Any other elder law questions? No? Was this helpful?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
I wrote a bunch of stuff that I got to talk to you.
Good. Well, I'm gonna leave my cards. Do you guys want me to just give you some names of attorneys I know over here that practice in estate planning and elder law?
Nobody did highly.
Yeah, okay. So I'm gonna give you a couple guys. So for the elder law, estate planning elder law side, there's Nikki Mitchell. And I wanna say she's with Mitchell, Brown and Associates.
Hey, Kyle. You're the chapter secretary. Make sure you get these down, please.
I am writing it down.
Let me give you Nikki Mitchell, attorney.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mitchell, Brown and Associates. They're in Kirkwood. Okay, and then he's a Missouri and Illinois estate planning attorney who I think the world of. My clients, when I refer him, love him. His name is Joseph O'Keefe. And another kind of spunky state elder law attorney who I love is Bridget Fernandez. Fernandez. It's Bridget, Brigid, Fernandez, Fernandez. She's a spunky. She's more elder law, and she is in off Manchester, St. Louis. What else?
Say company.
Fernandez Law, elder law. So that's more the elder law side. I mean, they all do estate planning though too. right, that's part of elder law, so. If you've got LLCs or family farms, I recommend Joseph O'Keefe. As part of your estate planning. He gets he gets a lot of my Missouri. Those people are my kind of go-tos that my clients are always happy with, and I am too.
What company is just looking?
It's Dill, Dill, Bomvakis, Bamvakis, Dill, Bomvakis, and O'Keefe. Yeah, he's probably a little more estate planning, business planning, LLC, that sort of thing. And he crosses the river to Illinois. All great people. And they all owe me a steak dinner after today, since everybody's in Missouri. Yeah. AAIS, yeah, Dill, Bomvakis, and O'Keefe. Yeah, and I'll just leave with pens. I don't know if you guys like pink pens. Real men wear pink. I'll leave some cards in case you just need to pick my brain. I'm always happy to refer if I don't can't handle it. Yeah. That's the whole point, right? It's more important you get your documents in place.
Yeah.
And your parents' documents in place. Yep. It's good to have a death box. A lot of people use their gun safe or a little black box at home.
It's so hard to start having those conversations with parents.
Oh, is it? My dad wouldn't talk to me about it, and I had a nurse just come in, and a doctor come in, and said, "Do not resuscitate that night before he died."
Yeah, having the conversation literally at the last minute.
It wasn't easy, so.
All right. You need me for
I
anything else?
appreciate it very much, everything online.
Thank you
Very
guys.
much. If, what I'll do.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Send it out to y'all.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Here, sorry. Thanks for the water.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome.